how do we get out of this situation in BC where we can't, we're not in favor of developing resources, we're not in favor of changing regulations so that we can do things faster and supporting business. Where is the end? Where do we get to the end of that? So this is the thing I don't understand about the critics. It's like, why do you care where the money gets spent? The argument that, well, we're giving the money to First Nations, therefore we are somehow losing money is ridiculous, because economic growth is created by people spending money. Like, that's how you get these next level growth of the economy. So who cares?
Yo, yo, ho, hey, yo, yo, ho, hey, yo. Ow, ow, ow! Here we are, season 3, Res Dog Walkers. I got my Blue Jays stuff on. Blue Jays are beating the crap out of the Yankees, at least till the last game. They play again tonight. I won't say the date, but if real baseball fans are around, they'll be able to reverse engineer that. A lot going on in British Columbia and Canada right now, and I know I keep saying I'm going to stop interviewing my friends, but I've got a few friends that I've developed over the years who have very detailed and learned opinions around things that are happening both in British Columbia and Canada. And my guest today probably qualifies as an all the above. Christy Clark, how are you?
Nice to be here, Dallas.
Do I have to call you Premier still?
No,
Is that one of those things that
no.
carries on, the Honourable?
No, it definitely doesn't.
You know I would if I had to. I'm that kind of guy.
I know you would. Do I have to call you Chief?
No, not yet. Well, I mean, you can if you like, but we're still working through that. It's been the longest transition plan in history of First Nations politics.
No, that's saying something.
Yeah, no. So I'm still doing the day-to-day activities with my nation, but my dad's still sitting in the seat, and we got a community development, and we'll get into all that and more.
Are you deputy chief?
I'm acting chief is the
You're
term that
acting
we're
chief,
using
okay.
right now. Yeah, we're under the hereditary system still, and so we're working through some of the nuts and bolts as we're building a new community. We built our first 10 houses.
Wow.
So we went from a community with no houses to 10 houses. We got 15 more being built next year. And
That's
so
huge.
I'm helping direct traffic and all that and trying to find a way to pay for it.
Yeah.
Governments don't quite have the money that they used to when they're dealing with their fiduciary responsibilities. So own source revenue is important. Something else I'd like to talk about during this little sit down. But
okay.
First of all, how are you? What have you been doing? I know the last time I saw you was 2017, and I horribly let you down. I kind of let all of British Columbia down. If I won that seat, might be in a completely different world right now. And I sort of say that jokingly because there's a couple other people who shit the bed too. But and that is a lie. I have seen you many times since 2017.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you shouldn't take responsibility for that, Dallas. You should not.
I blame Mike McDonald.
Yeah, no, we should. Yeah, I think Mike was the problem. Yeah. There were other problems that didn't include Mike. But, when I look back on it, we had a $3 billion surplus. And I was sitting around saying, you know what? We're doing okay in the polls. We've got a $3 billion surplus. That is generational fairness. We should take that money and plop it all down on the debt, and then we can do something good for our kids. And then we could have, but instead we could have cut taxes, we could have eliminated tolls, we could have done a whole bunch of things that would have made a big difference in the electoral world, right? They wouldn't have been bad things to do. Mm-hmm. I still think the wiser thing to have done would have been to put it down on the debt, because I do worry about our kids and the debt and stuff. But we didn't do it, and it turns out it was a politically stupid decision. And so therefore, you are freed from any obligation here.
I've been waiting for this closure. I've been waiting there was a Team BC 2017. I still got the jacket, actually.
Oh, man. I got mine, too.
Yeah, I wear it once in a while on cloudy days, but we can talk about that another time, too. Mine
is too small for me now. I got too fat.
I need to run again so I can do the door knocking, just so I can lose the weight. I was at my best fighting weight when I ran for you. Top notch. I was ready to go. Thank you for coming. This is amazing. We've been talking about this for probably about a year and a bit now, when we bump into each other at various things, and really glad to have you here. But just a little bit of history for our viewers and listeners. Christy and I have built this relationship over the years, but it started so embarrassingly, and I'll see how much you laugh when you start to actually put this together and remember it. First time I met you was when were you Minister of Education?
2001 to 2004.
Okay. Our mutual friend Stan Hagen used to have these big parties on budget day or opening of the house day.
Yeah.
And you came by one of those, and I brought my mom with me, and she just embarrassed me horribly because she's a teacher. And not, I don't mean my mom embarrasses me horribly.
Because we did Bill.
You guys were in the middle of restructuring.
100 and something,
And so I brought my mom to the legislature, and she just started going off about education and just not realizing the room that we were in when she was doing it. It was quite funny. But then...
Well, good for her.
Yeah,
I mean, she's advocating.
She told her piece. Yeah, no, she did what she needed to do. I didn't invite her anymore after I went to any of those events, but we'll talk about that next Christmas, I guess. But then... You took a time off. You took a little bit of hiatus from government. I remember you had your own talk show host.
I did.
This is what feels weird sitting with you now when you're an actually accomplished talk show veteran. But you were emceeing an event. The Great Bear Rainforest won a Gift of the Earth Award from the World Wildlife Fund, and you you emceed the dinner.
Yeah.
And I was meeting with you beforehand, and we were working on the pronunciations of the different First Nations communities and names. And my father, who has had 5 wives, I've had a few stepmoms in my time.
Not all at the same time.
Started flirting with
Tell
you.
me not all at the same
not all at
time.
the same time. His grandfather, yes, but that's a different time then. But my father started hitting on you just relentlessly, and it was like the most embarrassing political moment of my life to that point. This is probably 2010-ish, 9-ish, somewhere around there.
Well, I was flattered.
Yes, no, you.
I was flattered.
I mean, my dad is a big chief,
Yes.
Very,
serious
looks
guy,
like a mafia guy,
funny
all
guy.
that. Yeah, funny guy. He's just pulling
Good-looking
out all the
guy.
stops. Yeah, and I'm just, Dad, stop. Like,
Well, I didn't think he was serious. Like,
no, well,
apparently I could have been wife number 6, I guess.
Wouldn't
you
that be weird
imagine?
having my stepmom being the premier?
I mean, if the premier had married a consequential First Nations chief in British Columbia, that would have done something for relationships.
Premiership could have gone hereditary.
What?
Look at my mind's blowing right now.
I know. To hell with democracy.
So we get through that, and then you decide to come back.
Yes.
Then you decided to run for premier.
Yeah.
You decided to run for leader of the party first, but
That's
then you
right.
decided to run for premier.
2010.
2010. And that's when I first started hanging around the Liberal Party a little bit regularly. Stan Hagen passed away, and I gave kind of the eulogy at his service at his political service in the Comox Valley.
Yeah.
And Gordon Campbell came up to me after that and asked me to run in his spot. And that was the first time I had ever even contemplated provincial politics. Here I was, just barely a First Nations leader, and the premier of the province comes up and says, "Hey, I know you're close with Stan. Why don't you run in his riding? We got the machinery. We'll help you out." And for a minute, I was like, "Yeah, this is a really cool idea." And then I thought about, "Oh, wait, what? Really? Oh, no, okay, I'm not ready yet. Not ready yet."
Yeah.
So I go back and go through the Great Bear Rainforest.
And you would have been in cabinet if you'd run.
Well, in those days, possibly, yeah. And then, you and I come together as you become premier, and we put the Great Bear Rainforest to bed.
Oh man, that was a thing. That was a thing. That was the thing that took me. At the end of the day, because we did it, and it was such an incredible. Like, it's the size of bigger than Ireland.
3.1 million hectares.
And it was not easy. Steve Thompson deserves a lot of credit for putting that together too. Like getting the forest company's interests, the community's interests, the First Nations interests, like getting all that. You were doing it. You know what that was. But after the end of it was done, and we just unveiled it. And someone comes from the palace, like from Buckingham Palace, rolls into Vancouver and says, listen, we've got this problem. I won't do my accent. Anyway. We've got this problem. The Queen has the Queen's Canopy Initiative, and we want to. She has to get enough stuff under the initiative that makes it look like we've met our goal. And they've got like little countries like Haiti and Antigua are all in. Like they don't have as much forest as we do in Stanley Park, right? They don't have much land, so they're desperate. And we say to them, recognizing that they're desperate, so what do we get for it? Yeah. They said, well, what we'll do is we'll have the premier come to Buckingham Palace and personally receive the award from the Queen on behalf of the province. And then we said, well, what else? They said, well, the Duke and Duchess, now the Prince and Princess, will come to BC and, do all this stuff for a week. They were here for a week, which was, it was an amazing experience to be with all these guys. So that was kind of the happy outcome of it all. But the bigger outcome being, it's the size of Ireland.
Totally.
And working through that, the work that you did on that was incredibly hard. Because I remember, too, when the Duke and Duchess came and we did that trip,
we went to Bella Bella.
We went to Bella Bella, and the First Nation up there was not happy.
No,
they were not happy. Prime Minister's office decided they would go to Bella Bella. By the way, we phoned the pals and said, we have intel from our friends in the Indigenous community. This might not be the moment.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So it's just on that, because I don't want to forget. As you know, I'm a little flippant sometimes. I think I'm a little funnier than I do sometimes. And I remember getting ready for the Royal Tour. And I think we were flying out of Richmond, the South Terminal, and we were flying up to Bella Bella on a charter.
Yeah.
And I don't remember, it was Neil
Duke
Sweeney.
and Duchess were on that with you.
Yes,
and me, I remember
so we
that.
were on that together, and we're doing the little briefing about the protocol of talking to the royals.
Yeah.
And Neil Sweeney, I think it was Neil Sweeney, pulls me aside and he says, the Premier thinks you're hilarious, but not today.
You know what, Dallas? I never told him that.
No, I didn't think you would have.
He completely
Usually you take my
invented
muzzle
that.
off. Yeah.
Well, why not? I mean, if they're coming here, all the way here, and we want them to
enjoy the authentic experience.
Well,
right?
no, literally though, Dallas. Seriously, and we want them to understand our culture, and Indigenous communities are very much a part of, the mosaic of our culture. Then you should be who you are.
Definitely.
That's my feeling about it.
It's funny because I sort of behave, because we're sitting there in the event when we're doing the actual initiative, and Wills gets up His Royal Highness gets up to speak. And then they come back after, and we're all kind of milling around after the photo ops and all that. And I look at Princess Kate and I said, me and Wills have a lot in common. My granny bosses me around a lot too, and I married above my status. And she literally spit a little bit of tea out of her mouth. And the reporters kind of caught this, and they're all like, what the hell happened? What the hell happened? And Sweeney's looking at me like, and so we just laughed it off and kept it between us. But I think William Housty, one of the leaders of the Celtic, was there, and he's just like, bro, too much.
Too much it was.
But they both had a good laugh.
Oh,
it was funny,
yeah. No, I mean, they're charming, wonderful,
was.
open-hearted people. That was my experience of them.
The behind the scenes tour that he did, he wanted to take out a fishing rod and go fishing right on the river right there. He just wanted to experience the whole
he wanted
coastal.
to reach in and grab a fish.
Yeah.
And pick it up and take
and
it,
security
right?
was like, sorry, Your Highness.
Oh, no, it wasn't. No. It was me. I had to go tell them it's illegal. You can't dive in and grab the fish.
I'm sure he has some pull with the Constitution or something.
Yes, I suppose so.
All you needed was an international incident at the time, though.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. No, that was a great experience. But you think about the complexity of that, and people just kind of, I'm sure, look at it now. They're like, well, Great Bear Rainforest, that's great. Well, you guys did a lot of work on that.
I mean, the important thing about the Great Bear Rainforest, we created coast funds, $30 million from your government, $30 million from the Harper government at the time.
Yeah.
And then 60 million private funds that were raised.
Yeah, that wasn't
so
nothing.
Much for conservation. No, that came together, and it's still paying off. We've actually leveraged that money to about 430 million. We've done with that 120 million.
Wow.
And then before Trudeau resigned, he gave us 200 more million to do the marine component, which we leveraged for another big chunk of money. So it's all under an endowment, and we're living off the interest, and we've really set up this paradigm on conservation. But there's another side of that coin that needs to be talked about, the economy.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of the protection we did. I spent years in the Great Bear Rainforest. I spent my whole career. I went in there a boy and really came out a man. But when I came out a man, I still hadn't built a house for an elder. I still didn't deal with education problems. I still didn't deal with support services that we needed. So we did this beautiful conservation vision, but we had nothing to do with the economy. And we had already locked down everything from protection.
Yeah.
But then I met Ellis Ross. And Ellis Ross said, you guys ever think about LNG?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of talking to the Premier about it.
Yeah.
So why don't you just talk about something, because this is timely, because obviously Haisla is delivering LNG to the world. So we got clean, sustainable fuel from BC going to offset carbon and other dirty fuels that are being used. But, when this discussion started, there were so many people who thought it was such a pipe dream. So why don't you just give me a little bit of thought on, where you were with Ellis and the Haisla in those days, and talking about Ellis and I ran in 2017 together. That's another little, that you were the leader. But just that time when, it was in its infancy. It was just something that a few of us were discussing. Now that it's real, what was some of that days like?
So the way it unfolded was I become leader in 2011. And what my whole thing was, we need to create jobs in British Columbia. Like, we have to get this economy supercharged and create jobs. And I thought, okay, how do we do that? So I sent one of my deputies around to talk to every deputy in government and sit down and say, okay, what jobs ideas do you have? Like, give me all your ideas that you have to create jobs in your department, in your ministry. And, some of them it's a little bit harder, right? Like health and social services, they're not going to produce direct economic work and things like that. And they just sort of go their own way. But she ends up going to one of the deputies, Steve Carr, who was deputy minister of, I think it was called Natural Resources at the time. And he says, look, I don't know if this is going to be a great idea or a terrible idea, but, there's this guy up in Kitimat, and he thinks that we should be doing an LNG plant up there. He was talking about doing an import plant, but now it looks like, the economic circumstances have changed. We should do an export plant. Can't do it. Gordon Campbell's rules around climate will not allow it, blah, blah, blah. So, but I still think it's a viable thing. No one had ever thought about it. Like, no one had ever heard about it. So then I go out, I fly, like 2 days later, I fly up to Kitimat, to Haisla, and I get off the helicopter in Kitimat Village, and there's Ellis there. I meet him for the first time, and he talks me through it. We do the ride around up there, and I'm like, we're going to change the legislation to make this possible, like in one day, because the potential for jobs was so big.
Huge,
like it was,
huge.
I knew how much natural gas we had, so I thought, well, if we export it, we can diversify our economy and all that, like all that sort of stuff. And so Ellis was pivotal in it. And then I went back, we started working on it, we started talking about it, and inside government we were taking it really seriously. What kinds of jobs are involved? Do you need glaziers? Do you need pipe fitters? How do we create all that? And then we started talking about it publicly. And I was immediately, remember this is 2011, right? So I was kind of an interim premier. And I was already, everybody already thought I was like a loser. The media immediately went, that's an idiotic idea. And you're just as stupid. And I really felt like they were saying you're a stupid woman, but they didn't say it. And because I didn't have the gravitas that a man like Gordon Campbell had brought to the job, I think, in their eyes. And we just powered out. So then I go and I meet with the Harper government, and they're the same way. They're like, Ellen, what?
Yeah.
Like, they have no idea. Why don't you just focus on our damn
He's
pipeline?
a Calgary guy.
Yeah. But Alberta doesn't do gas much. It's like a little pimple on their butt, right? They've got the oil. So they're like, no, we want to do Northern Gateway. We want to do an oil pipeline. And all you're talking about is this idiotic LNG thing that Canada's never done and will never be good at. So it was kind of like it was a hard lift, a heavy lift. But look where we are now. First LNG business ever in Canada.
2 or 3 a week now.
Yep.
Heading out of there.
Yep, and maybe more. Right. Yep. There's so much gas there with the Niska getting after it, and a few other nations thinking about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where you may never get credit really for something, and it might be really, really painful getting there, but it was really worth doing. Even if it took way too long because Horgan stalled the thing, and then Eby stalled the thing, and then Justin Trudeau was completely opposed to it. It just goes to show really hard things. It's possible to do them.
Definitely stay committed.
Yeah.
You verge on being committed, but then you stay committed. It's too close.
Yeah, I guess so. You know what though? I was like, I didn't ever know I was so pig-headed until I became the because that was a big pig-headed thing to do. Everybody thought it was nuts, but there were some believers.
Definitely,
right?
some in your own cabinet. I mean,
in my
watching
own,
it come around.
Yeah, and you believed in it, and Ellis believed in it, and I really saw it as a way to enrich First Nations communities as well. Like, for me, it was really an important part of building the relationship between us, because it in retrospect too, I didn't see this at the beginning, but it required that governments sit down at the table with First Nations and actually talk about the specific things that were holding people back. And we knew the private sector would go in and do their thing. Yeah, sure. Well, here's the money. Here's the jobs. Here's the for whatever. But like the First Nations would say, well, 50% of the kids in foster care are our kids, and once they go in, they almost never come back. They never come back. And you know, I would see grandmothers and mothers crying about the education system, the failure of government and healthcare, how people get the all weather road in the winter isn't really all weather. Like all of those painful things, the suicides, the drug addiction. And it's like you can't walk out of those meetings and feel like this is all about the money and it's all about the economic growth. It was like, for me, I really became very committed to the idea that this was part of our obligation as my generation to reconcile with First Nations. And I realized that unless there is economic growth and the creation of wealth in Indigenous communities, there will never be an end to the pain. Because, you know, the poverty is a terrible, terrible condition and almost inescapable for most people. And the only solution to poverty is wealth. And the only way to create wealth in Indigenous communities, which are mostly rural and remote, is to get out there and use the resources that are on and under the ground and in the ocean. That's the only way to do it. And so I just sort of saw LNG as this key to unlocking some of these problems that we've had. And so when I see this debate about like, oh, well, should we do pipelines? Should we do this? Should we do that? From the folks in Ottawa, should we do fish farms? I'm like, how do you think you can say in one sentence, we need to support First Nations, we're going to reconcile with First Nations, if you're not going to give First Nations the tools to do it?
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting watching the evolution of that discussion. You know, I remember when Premier Campbell brought forward reconciliation and recognition. And I know some young, smart First Nations leaders said, well, you don't quite have it yet. But you kept doing it. And then when you came in, you doubled down on that. I mean, when Gordon Campbell did it, I think it was a bold step. He went from being the premier who challenged the Nisga'a Treaty to unite his party. You know, we found out after he knew it was just a calculated risk to say, okay, I'm going to unite the people here. We're going to say it, and then we're going to let the people speak. And the people of BC spoke, no, we need reconciliation, we need treaties. But then for you to take that from, you know, and I'm not going to say lip service. I know Gordon well enough that he meant what he was doing, but he had no idea where to go with it. We were all learning as we went, as we were trying to do these things. I think of Alan Adzurza and Jessica McDonald and some of those people who were tasked with trying to say, okay, build us a roadmap to reconciliation. And we all kind of like, well, that's not it. No, that's not it. Oh, that's getting closer. And we all just kind of figured it out as we went. But for you to take that and actually double down at a policy level really gave us the time to make that transformative change happen. So not only did we develop industries, we made First Nations front and center to be beneficiaries of those industries. And what people are starting to see now, that is when we develop own source revenue, we just reinvest it back into our communities and to our regions. And that's one of the challenges in reconciliation right now. I'm watching the legislature, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, but this whole fear of the right side of the spectrum of First Nations being in the driver's seat, when we see how we keep that money internal and regional and local, people are starting to see that because of LNG Canada and things like that. So I just want to applaud you for having the tenacity to just sort of say, okay, we started on a course with this, and I think there's more road that needs to be plowed here. We need to get farther down this line.
So like, this is the thing I don't understand about the critics. It's like, why do you care where the money gets spent? Because if First Nations, or if First Nations and a local community gets the money, they're going to spend that putting a new roof on their house, you know, and they're going to, from the village, the town down the street, they're going to go to Williams Lake. Some guy at Williams Lake is going to get the contract, and a bunch of guys are going to be working. If somebody goes and buys an F-150, I think I hit yours on the way in here.
It's
as I was parking my car.
ICBC rates were lower when you were premier, but
that's an excellent point.
We'll talk about that later too.
But, I mean, if somebody buys an F-150, that Ford dealer down the street is going to, that money's going to multiply into the community. So the argument that, well, we're giving the money to First Nations, therefore we are somehow losing money, is ridiculous, because economic growth is created by people spending money. Like, that's how you get these next level growth of the economy. So who cares? But I mean, I do care. Because I think First Nations should be getting that money, should be getting some of that money, because that's how, I mean, again, it's wealth is what erases poverty, and poverty is what creates you know.
I asked a lot of when we were going through the Great Bear stuff, we were trying to talk what human well-being went, and I remember asking a couple of my elders, a couple of my uncles, like, what do we do about the poor people? And the first thing he said was, don't be one of them. You know, generate wealth for our community. And he was a fisherman. He was a fisherman for years and hired his nephews and just kept the economy going in our little regional villages up and down the coast. And that's the kind of mentality that I think needs to be taken to coastal resource development. Fish farming, you know, funny story, I was at this crossroads, John Paul Fraser, you know, friend, I know he worked in your government a little bit.
He's my son's godfather.
Oh, is he? Okay. Yeah, so John Paul, when he went to go head up the BC Salmon Farmers Association after the 2017 election, he called me up and he says, you know, we really need to unite the First Nations on this issue. We're having a hard time, you know, getting traction on aquaculture policy and things like that. Little did we know that Justin Trudeau, well, actually Jonathan Wilkinson was coming for us. We just saw a tip of the iceberg at that point. But John came to me and said, you know, why don't we just sit down and start having some of these discussions? And just shortly after that, Kieran Ogden called me and says, we're looking for a strategic advisor for LNG Canada. But John Paul asked first, and I'm still one of those idiots who goes by his word and just goes by, you know, oh, he asked first, so I got to give him this chance first. And I decided to take the job as advisor to the First Nations on aquaculture instead of taking the First Nations strategic advisor job on LNG Canada. So my decision-making process is just getting worse and worse.
No, it isn't. It isn't. I mean, you know fish. Like,
I do,
that's the thing about it, right?
Yeah.
And I think someone of your stature and with your strong voice is really important for that business.
You're obviously not on Facebook very much because, you know, just like you, I get the shit beat out of me on Facebook over the most logical discussions that I'm having.
You know, I choose to think that all of the people who are yelling at me on Facebook are Russian and Chinese bots. Huh? That's how I choose to think about it.
You were really the first premier to be in the digital age. I mean, it was
hard.
I'm going to get in trouble. The nerds of the day were on social media back before it really became mainstream, but you became premier right when it was really starting to hit its stride.
It's true. Back when media believed that all that stuff was real.
Yeah, definitely.
And I mean, you know, you could see the staff would say, you know, well, this, you know, we'd be in a labor dispute with somebody or whatever, and they'd like, oh, okay, the XYZ union just turned on their bots, and you can see it. You know, there was one point where the federal government itself was turning its bots on us because they didn't like what we were doing, right? I don't know. But the fish farming stuff, though, Dallas, is, I think, really important for BC because, I mean, there's a couple of things. One, I think getting rid of farm fish is going to put enormous pressure on the wild stock.
Food, yes.
And I think that's a big problem. Second, there is no evidence. I mean, believe me, if there was any evidence that that fish farms were affecting the wild stock, there would be. I would be completely in favor of getting rid of them.
Totally.
But there's no evidence. Yeah. We have the federal scientists looking at it, the provincial scientists. I can tell you those provincial scientists always err on the side of, no, we don't want this to happen, right? Those guys wouldn't be making this stuff up. So I think, you know, there's a couple of reasons to be in favor of fish farms. And the third one is, as one of the chiefs on Vancouver Island says, and I'm trying to remember his name, he said, you know, we had this many suicides, and then we started fish farming, and now we have none. Yeah. Like, that's a living example of the generation of wealth and the impact that it can have for people in creating hope and employing people. And, you know, if you have a job, you have hope.
Definitely.
Right? And
aquaculture, I mean, these are good jobs. These are community supporting jobs. These are household community jobs. And the funny thing about it is we've gotten through the science and, you know, people still, why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? Because those 700 jobs matter in my communities. They're remote communities. You've toured them. You've been around them. You know, unemployment's at 60, 70%. And then you take out someone making 100 to 160 grand a year out of that workforce, that whole community feels the ripple effect of that.
Totally.
And, you know, it was a tough thing because, you know, you actually started a committee with Norm Letnick when he was the Minister of Agriculture at the time and asked me to sit on it with him. And we actually talked about a meaningful transition. Okay, how do we keep looking at new technology? What kind of infrastructure do we need to implement new technology like in Norway? And then it just completely went in all kinds of different directions. And I've spent the last 3 years fighting with, you know, Jonathan Wilkinson and Joyce Murray just to get to Ottawa to talk to Trudeau about it. And I'm thinking back, though, there's one story about Trudeau that I got to tell. Remember your first minister's meeting when you were premier?
Was it okay? Was it
You were hosting, or the first one you hosted
first
in
one?
Vancouver.
Oh
so,
yeah, that because I did a whole bunch of them.
You did a bunch of them, but you did the first one you did in
That's
Vancouver.
right. I remember that. Yeah.
You asked myself, Ellis, and I think Shane Godfredson might have been the BCFN chief at the time, or I think Shane was chief anyway. You asked us to come. Usually you bring a couple ministers or whoever your people, but you asked all First Nations leaders to join you.
Yeah.
And then you got your chance to speak and tried to give the floor to Ellis and I believe, to say a few words just on what we thought was going on in British Columbia, and Trudeau wouldn't allow it, and you got into it with him. And it was so cool because no one's ever really gone to bat for us before. You know, we're used to being window dressing, and we're okay, we'll go there and we'll smile. I had fun being your arm candy for a little while. I did. I shouldn't even say shit like that, but it's my show, so I can say shit like
You
that.
can say whatever you want.
But
Trudeau, I don't know if Trudeau
but
ever forgave me for that.
I gave him shit for that. I got to know him a little bit as he is on his way out the door. I always meet you guys when you're going out the door. And I got to get better at meeting you guys sooner.
Well, hey, come on. I knew you in 2011.
No, you did. True.
Yeah.
True. But yeah, Trudeau just got so caught up in the social media of the fish farm issue that he just deferred to people who had an extreme bias against it. And he put a policy in place that we're going to keep fighting until we fix it. But it set us back 4 or 5 years on economic development on the coast of British Columbia.
Because, they had kind of a modus operandi, which I hate in politics, which is not what should we do, what can we do, it's what do we need to do to get elected. And I was always thinking, I think all good politicians just call myself a good politician. Sorry about that. I think,
you were.
I think what politicians should be doing is saying, here's what needs to be done. How do I convince enough people, that this is something that's a good thing to do? Like, how do I sell it to people and introduce it to people, which we did with LNG, right? And fish, I've always supported fish farms, but it's like, rather than, this is going to be hard. And people aren't going to like it, so we're not going to do it. What can we do that people will like? I don't know. That's stupid. Like there's no plan there. There's no what's good for the public there.
What can we just avoid talking about even because people don't like it? And unfortunately, that's filtered into the civil service to a certain extent now. I mean, I still have utmost respect for the people who work for the government and do what they need to do. But everybody is so risk adverse now that trying to actually negotiate or collaborate around reconciliation, people are so afraid to go in any direction because they're going to piss somebody off. And I think of some of the early days where we just had to buckle in on the Great Bear, where we had to sort of tell the environmentalists, okay, you got your 3.1, now we need to talk about what we're going to do with the rest to keep the forest companies around. All those sorts of things.
All those high-paying jobs.
All those high-paying jobs, again, the GDP, all those important things that matter at the end of the day just as much as conservation. But, you've been traveling around a little bit, and I see you talking about this in different levels, but, what are some of the steps you think British Columbia needs to do to get back to more of a, hey, this is what we're doing, not like this is what we're afraid of doing, but this is actually what we're going to do, and this is what it's going to achieve. These are the results that we're looking for.
Well, I mean, I think when I look at what Carney's doing, and Carney's basically doing the same thing, has basically the same outlook that we did, right? Although it's a little more urgent for him because of the U.S. tariffs, but he, grow the economy, diversify the economy, create jobs, build infrastructure. And once just the act of building infrastructure creates a ton of jobs and tax revenue and helps you balance your budget. Like, I think that's where he's going with all this stuff. And I think we have to double down on that. I mean, Canada is the richest country in the world if you count resources, and not even including all the stuff we don't know about, which is, there's a lot of it because it hasn't really been fully explored yet. Then figure out how to get that to the world, because we're a democratic country. We believe in the rule of law. We're a decent, fair, honorable country. People should want to do business with us. As things are tricky in the United States. Lots of people are looking for another place to find this stuff. So think about tungsten. It's really important for armor. It's important for building drones and other things that the Western world needs now to defend itself from hostile countries like Russia and China. So where is that mined? Where is it all over the world? It's in China, Russia, and Canada. Do you know where it's mined? China and Russia. Like, I think Japan could probably, and Poland probably, they'd like to have some of our tungsten. We got to figure out how to get it out of the ground. And that means the regulatory environment needs to be a lot simpler so that people can find their way to get an approval. Part of that, though, Dallas, is also the First Nations stuff. How do we, I think the challenge for Canada is, and provinces, is how do we work our way through the First Nations relationship so that we can actually make it move faster? Because we miss this moment in time. It may never come again.
Definitely. I mean, I think about that after Northern Gateway, and it wasn't my territory, and because of the work we were doing on the Great Bear, we definitely stood with the nations who said, we don't think we're quite ready for that yet. But as I was saying to you before the show started, there's a few people who've asked, well, what was on the table? TMX started the twinning of TMX started under your regime. I remember writing an op-ed saying that, there's already one there, putting one beside it just makes sense right now because it brings more capacity, but it brings less environmental impact that's already been managed and regulated and been oversawn. And now we're at a point where this pipeline's in place, and there's been a couple spills on the Coquihalla that they've had to manage, but they had the process in place to manage that.
Yes, they proved that it worked.
Yeah. And that's kind of where we need to go. It's interesting, this discussion on, I don't know if this new pipeline proposal's the one or there's more that are coming, but First Nations really need to start, they're not picking up their game. That means they're not doing it, but we have to start looking at both sides of the equation a lot more clearly.
Yeah.
But that comes down to capacity. If we have the capacity to sit down and really have a good look at something, we can do it. But in the days when I was helping to, arrange capacity building, we had U.S. foundations that we built relationships with. We were sort of only allowed to look at the conservation side of the coins on some of those things. So that's all we had the capacity to do. And we probably missed the opportunity to really build some foundations for how these future discussions are going to happen around tanker traffic. You brought up a good point last week on, I believe it was on CTV or CBC when you were back east. The ban only exists to Canadian ships.
Yeah.
And
there's American ships going down that way all the time. Because remember, there's Alaska at one end, and right? It's crazy that we just think about this as. I mean, I always thought it was just total performative politics. This tanker ban. It was again an example of, hey, what can we do to get public support, as opposed to what can we do to build the economy, create jobs, eliminate poverty in First Nations, and and make everybody's lives better. Now, maybe the answer isn't that pipeline, but the tanker ban shouldn't be there. And I don't think we are better off because, the world looks at us and says, oh, gee, we're going to try and stop resources leaving our country. I think I'm interested in your views. I'm going to ask you about this on the Northern Gateway. I mean, it's kind of Northern Gateway 2. They don't like it when I call it that probably, but it's kind of going to go most of the same route, and, all of the First Nations up there, except maybe the Lac Kw'alaams, we're not sure about that, have come out 100% in opposition to it. Is there a hope? What's going on with the First Nations up there? And is there a scenario in which there are enough First Nations along enough of a route that you could put together?
I'm going to cop out a little bit and then I'll get closer to the answer. CGL, Coastal GasLink, showed us that there's no such thing as complete, against or for anything. The Wet'suwet'en themselves were quite divided on Coastal GasLink.
And just so listeners understand, there are 5 councils, elected councils. Each of them was elected 3 times. So there were 15 elections where the pipeline, Coastal GasLink pipeline, was a major issue. And in every case, all of those 15 councils that were elected supported it. Yeah. But then
the hereditary stepped in.
And a bunch of, outside motivated people from the United States and from other parts of the country, and also, to be fair, British Columbians too came in and buggered it all up. But for a while anyway.
And I bring that up to say that, like I said, there are nations who sort of said, I wonder what was on the table and did we miss something? And now that, the discussion's been refloated again, the usual suspects who have had to deal, and to put it in perspective, the Celtic had to deal with Nathan Stewart. Unfortunately, right when I was running for you, there was two kind of coastal issues that flared up right before the writ dropped that hurt me a little bit. But like I said, I blame Mike McDonald, not those other issues.
Poor Mike. Mike, forgive me.
Yes, sorry, Mike. the Celtic, they had to live with the Nathan E. Stewart, and they figured out a way. They built capacity now to make sure that doesn't happen to them again.
Yeah.
So I understand the gun shyness to a certain extent, but this all came from Exxon Valdez. Let's not kid ourselves. Exxon Valdez was a catastrophe because we had a drunk captain who wasn't working with his ship properly.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm simplifying it a little bit, but the damage that was done from that is still hurting us to this day. And so I'm one of those guys who's more of a, well, how does it all fit? I've learned that I can protect major parts of the coast, both terrestrial and marine-wise, and I still have room for aquaculture. I still have room for tourism. I still have room for other economic development opportunities. And so I think the word never is a little bit subjective, even though never is supposed to be pretty absolute.
Yeah.
I'm no English major, but never means never. I don't think that really is the case. And I'm going to get shit on after this. I know it, but that's okay. I'm used to it. I got consultants to tell me I'm pretty. I don't need the other chiefs to tell me I'm pretty. But it's a discussion that has to be had.
Yeah.
I watched with the twinning. I've watched the discussions go. My good friend Chief Ian Campbell, when they were doing LNG and they did their own environmental assessment, they really had to look at every opportunity. And I think that's the kind of due diligence that's necessary before we start making declarations.
Yeah.
I mean, because once you make those declarations, it's really hard to back them up.
That's right.
Because it scares the investment community. It makes the other levels of government think that there's something in place that may or may not be. And so I would love to see this new major projects discussion that, Prime Minister Carney is trying to set up with guys like J.P. Gladue and Crystal Smith, who've really been down the road and understand it. I would really like to see them start, let's have a discussion about what if. And have a bit more of a, okay, this is the reality of what would happen. If we start this pipeline, this is the reality. These are the ships that are going to come through. This is the kind of tugboats that we need there to manage that, just like we've learned with LNG Canada in Kitimat territory. So, I think we can reverse engineer these things enough to a point where we shouldn't be saying never about anything because it's too absolute. We just don't know what the state of anything's going to be 50 years from now. We need to keep building an economy and not at the cost of anything. I think we've gotten good enough of showing companies how to operate in our territories without destroying things. I think we've gone far enough in our own land use planning to show how to protect the cultural features and manage those sorts of things that we need to have a bit of a theological exercise about, okay, how does a pipeline go here? Does it go here, over this mountain, under this river? But it's a discussion that should be had. I think we owe it to ourselves and future generations, just like if we're protecting things. We always protect things for future generations, except the economy.
Yeah,
and now we're at this point, and I'm going to use one more point on aquaculture. We think that we have a bit of a chance with Prime Minister Carney because he's more economically driven than Prime Minister Trudeau was. $1.6 billion is the current output of the aquaculture industry in British Columbia to the GDP. It's huge.
Huge.
It has the potential to grow to 3 or 4 billion if we bring in the investment that's waiting without really doubling or tripling in size. It's just making more use of the spaces that we're using. But to buy out the industry as we're set right now for 2029, it's going to cost $9 billion to the Canadian taxpayer to get rid of something that contributes up to $3 billion.
Yeah, and
the math is just not that hard.
When I first started as premier, I would visit First Nations communities and talked about LNG or whatever in 2011, and I remember one chief. I said, what can we do to support you? What do we need to work on together here? And he gives me this list, and I said, hey, listen, Chief, this is like a really long list. And he leans forward and he says, listen, I've had how many white premiers and white politicians have come up to visit my community since I've been chief? None of them. So I'm giving you this list
the whole list
with
now
everything
no
on
one's
it
coming back.
because I figure you're never coming back. And so, I always think about that when I think about fish farming, because government made a commitment to support this with First Nations, and not to mention investors, and now we're doing what it's the old switcheroo that First Nations have seen for centuries. right? And that's not okay anymore. We have to really be dealing in good faith. And it feels to me like killing the fish farming industry is probably the biggest bad faith move the federal government will have made in British Columbia in a couple of decades.
Definitely. I mean, after the evolution of where the province, which again started under Minister Letnick and the advisory council that you created, going on into the John Horgan days where we got him to support the industry to Prime Minister Trudeau. But BC did its part by requiring the companies to have First Nations consent to get your tenure. So to get your provincial tenure to actually structure and anchor something to the ground, which was BC's jurisdiction. Well, I'll use air quotes jurisdictions, mine too, but we'll fight about that next time. Before BC would give that little piece of paper saying you're authorized to do this in British Columbia waters, you had to have First Nations consent. So we got rid of that whole First Nations are against it thing.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting thing about it now is I have to do more work with Fraser River nations about the negligible impact to their territories because of salmon farming than I do with different levels of government. And that's just the activists that put us into this confrontational point. Yeah. Whereas I supported them on TMX. A lot of those nations bought into TMX. A lot of those nations have, sharing agreements on maintenance and those sorts of things along the whole pipeline route. There's probably 11, 12 different First Nations who are formally connected to TMX.
Yeah.
As a coastal nation, I was like, hey, that's your backyard. As long as you manage the impacts or mitigate any potential problems, great, do it. That's great. But for some reason, I don't get that benefit of the doubt. And it's not just me. There's 17 other First Nations in British Columbia who are doing salmon farming right now. But we're stuck in this, the 17 against the other 180. And that's the way that the federal government was looking at it. Now we've got, a new Minister of Fisheries. She's from the East Coast. She understands small communities, rural communities. We've got an economically focused Prime Minister. We've still been managing to keep the British Columbia government at least supporting the existing jobs that are going on. Yeah. So it's fun times.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if the federal government leads on this, I think they'll bring the provincial elements of the provincial NDP are going to come around to it too. But I just, I one of the great honors of my life was when I was premier was I was named and blanketed by the Howsit. And so I was standing there on Styx Island, or I was standing there in Tofino, in the original Tofino community.
Well, you grew up you spent some time on the West Coast as a child, didn't you?
Well, my grandfather was born there.
Okay. Yeah.
So my grandfather is recorded as the third child born in what was then called Tofino, which was an island.
The story about,
but I mean, of course, they only recorded white births, right? There were a lot of children born. But I was standing there, thinking about, I was looking over at Styx Island where the beach where probably my grandfather was born, and thinking about how his father was a fisherman, he was a fisherman, all his brothers were fishermen, thinking about how he was delivered by a First Nations midwife undoubtedly. Doula, He was, the shack that they built was, kind of tolerated or welcomed into the community by the First Nations community that was there, by the Outset at the time. He was, they learned how to fish, like they learned the texture of the ocean and the waves and how all that worked from the First Nations fishermen. And I was really, I stood there and thought, it was really an important moment in my life to realize how much connection there is and how much dependence there was for all of those white settlers on First Nations, on First Nations people. And kind of, you struggle to actually think about how that all got turned around and First Nations became dependent, utterly dependent on white society and the rules that we put in place and the structures that we created. It was a moment where I kind of realized, I guess emotionally, really viscerally, how wrong this had gone. And I know you live that every day, and I'm sure it just, it sounds like a ridiculous thing for, 45-year-old woman to finally recognize. It's like, where the fuck were you, Christy, right? But it was in that moment that I really sort of saw it from my own family's perspective. And that was, it changed me.
And I mean, that's, I think, important parts of reconciliation is where we understand how it changes us. I used to be a lock, stock, and barrel guy. No, it's not good enough until it's everything I've asked for. Over the years, Namakol's Council, which, got founded in 2007, still running strong today. We have own source revenue that's coming in from carbon credits that we negotiated during the Great Bear. We've got some forest stuff we worked out with Lee Doney when he was at Western Forest Products. We own part of the TFL now, and so we're experiencing all these kind of coming of age sort of things as a government. We have income coming in. Like I said, we got the Coast Funds endowments that know we're going to have stewardship offices in perpetuity now. But as we're starting to build this economic vision, we're finally having some of the tougher discussions about what support we need. Watching the relationship grow with municipal governments has been really interesting, because I've had a bit of a front row seat for this.
There's a bit of jealousy between the two, right?
There is.
Jurisdictional jealousy.
Jurisdictional jealousy challenges, just because of, old bylaws that have been set in certain areas that we're acquiring land in now. We're buying fee simple land off the reserve now and adding to reserves. But the good thing is we're actually starting to talk about it. The bad thing is government has no idea how to support us on it.
Yeah.
And not only that, they don't have the money anymore. I mean, that was one of the interesting things of, when we were working with, your governments and Gordon's before you, there's a capacity there that we were able to have discussions at the same time, at the same pace. Now we're sort of doing one thing in one room, we try to bring it to government, then government does something else and brings in something that they think everybody wants to hear. And we're all trying to fit within it somehow. But thankfully, to the work in the Great Bear, a lot of our coastal nations just know what we want to do. So we don't give a shit who's in government anymore. I mean, really, I've become agnostic on that.
Yeah, well, listen, when you're trying to get your mom into the hospital to a long-term care bed, I think you will care. Right?
That is a good point, and that's one of the realities of understanding that, oh shit, that does matter to us.
That's right. And province has to top up the lousy federal pittance they give per student in education and schools and stuff, right? Like, that partnership does matter. And
it does.
I mean, so the provincial, can we talk about this for a second?
Please.
Because I kind of get mad when I talk about it. But we've gone from $300 billion, for $3 billion surplus to like an $18 billion deficit or whatever it was, right? Whatever it's going to be. And you look at that and you think, how are we going to grow when we can't? Like when you don't even, people complain about Carney, oh my God, I'm going to spend to grow. Well, federal government's really big. How do we get out of this situation in BC where we can't, we're not in favor of developing resources. We're not in favor of changing regulations so that we can do things faster and supporting business. We're not in favor of cutting anything in government. The size of government, we're just going to keep growing it. Like, where is the end? Where do we get to the end of that? And how does British Columbia find its way out of that? So I look at that and I actually think it's the First Nations communities who are best positioned. I mean, I'm sorry to throw this all on your shoulders.
It's okay, they're big shoulders.
But I mean, it's the First Nations communities that are really going to be the antidote to it, the people that can lead in this. Because your relationship with the government is vital to them. And I think First Nations can really.
Well, and we're learning how to stake our place a little bit better now. Before, I still grew up in the time where we expected government to do this stuff for us. It's almost like, fighting with your spouse. Like, what do you mean you don't know what's wrong? We've got this relationship and you don't know what's wrong with me? Well, what the fuck are we in it for? But I remember, one of the first times we announced Great Bear. We announced Great Bear like 5 times, Gordon and I did it once and you and I did it once or twice.
There was a lot of juice in that thing.
Though. It was worth it, yeah. I'm still going to get two or three more out of it before my time.
And you look great in your traditional
I should show you
ceremonial.
some of them. I'll see if I can get them. There's some memes.
Very sexy.
During the campaign time, there are some just horrible memes made about you and me when I was up there with my traditional garb. I'll see if I can get them up and we'll put them on the back of the screen when we air the episode, just so people can realize how out of touch they were at that time.
Were they making fun of me or you or both?
Oh, just both. Yeah. I mean, then some of it just missed, but they just had a picture of you and I standing together with me with my headdress on and just some of the meanest, outlandish shit ever. It's
racist.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Not that funny.
When I realized it didn't bother me, it was funny. And when my mom had to read it and see it, it was kind of like, oh shit, sorry, Mom, maybe you should stay off Facebook for a couple months.
I know. I never let my mother get onto social media.
No.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got to get better at just staking our place. I think of some of the great young leaders that way. We had so many great leaders who got us here. got us to the table. But some of these guys who are walking through the door, Crystal Smith,
Yeah.
you know, she's just a
Yeah.
powerhouse. John Jack. You know, John Jack is what I call a triple threat. He's culturally grounded, he's educated, and he's already a veteran of politics.
Yeah, he's
you
great.
know, he's fearless.
Yeah.
You know, and we have these, I mean, I'm the old guy in the room now. Before I used to be the youngest guy by 10, 12 years, and now I'm the older guy. It kind of feels a little bit weird, but...
But First Nations are endowed with rights
Yes.
and you know, that are really unique in the country, BC First Nations in particular. So I just think there's an opportunity there for, I hate, like I said, I do hate to put it on your shoulders too much, but it just seems like we are going in exactly the wrong direction.
Right now we are.
Yeah, in this moment of crisis in our country, forestry is a good example. It's not just fish farming that's going to be affecting your community. The annual allowable cut, you know, so people know is like, that's the amount that the foresters, the scientists say you're allowed to cut every year in the province while we can still sustain, our long-term forestry business. It's been cut in half, like arbitrarily by the government. And they blame First Nations for it.
All the time.
I mean, it's ridiculous. And those are your jobs. Those are your workers.
The ironic thing is there's 2 tenures in the province right now that get cut to their max every year. Their whole allowable cut gets done, and it is Huayet, who owns it. Western Forest Products owns both of them.
Right.
One in a partnership with Huayet and one in a partnership with Nemacol's Council Nations.
Those
They're
are the
only
only
ones that
ones.
get done all the way through because we do all the permitting together. We walk through the plans together. And so it's tough for me to listen to First Nations get used as an excuse for the lack of progress when we're showing people how to get it done. But other nations, you know, and I never want to sound condescending because everybody's in their own space and their own, you know, actual realities, but we got to get so much better at telling people what we want. You know, Duncan Davies, you know, we both know Duncan a little bit. He just told me, tell me the rules so I can follow them and know what they are.
Yeah.
You know, and as long as First Nations are a lot more transparent with what they're looking for in these relationships, we can get past the things that are slowing down permits, and we're not kind of transactioning each other to death. I think that's been the biggest problem with reconciliation is people see the dollars that could potentially be behind it, and everything's a transaction. It's okay, I'm going to protect this and you're going to give me that. I'm going to develop this and you're going to give me that. As opposed to saying this is the balance that we need to use for managing these resources sustainably going into the future. But it's tough right now because the last 18 months, 2 years, we've really watched a lot of hate bring its way back into BC politics. I'm watching what's going on with Dallas Brody and BC One and watching the Conservatives just not sure what to do around Reconciliation Day when there's a lot of good people in that caucus. You know, John Rustad was a friend of mine when he was in your government. He was the Minister of Aboriginal Relations for a long time. Him and I made a lot of great deals together that other nations in BC have now gotten onto. But just some of your view on just kind of how divided it is. It's either hard left or hard right, and there's no one really working in the missing middle anymore.
Yeah.
Some of your thoughts on that?
I don't think of it as the middle. I think of it as being practical. So you can be right wing, left wing, center, or whatever. If you're practical and you have, you're saying, okay, let me think this through. If we want BC to do well, people need to have jobs. If people are going to have jobs, they're going to pay taxes. Where are they going to get those jobs? Well, let's figure out how we have a job creation strategy that will include everyone, and you know, and then at increasingly higher wages, so that we can do well as a province. Like, to me, that's just practical. And you can be right wing or left wing. Like in my caucus, it was a pretty broad group of people. We had people who were, you know, like Terry Lake, for example. Like he was definitely on the left, and he was great at cabinet. He would always stand up and he would fight for his values, particularly with respect to the environment. He would really fight for that stuff, and then I'd have people who were just like, you know, let bulldoze it, burn it, whatever, dig it up, whatever.
Dig it up, build it.
But they all understood that we had a plan to grow the economy, using the resource sector and to create jobs, and that was its own good in and outside First Nations communities. And like everybody was bought into that. So after that, it's just details of how you get there. That's the thing that I think is so tragic right now, is that these guys, if you're a New Democrat, you are like, you know, you're kind of all you're really allowed to talk about is how do we settle these big wage increases that we want for the public sector unions that are putting a whole bunch of pressure on us. To hell with the rest of it. And then on the other side, you've got the exact opposite, which is, how do we do this for the communities that we represent and do it as fast as possible without any regulatory environment? Like, it's just dumb.
Yeah.
It's just dumb. Like, we need regulation. We just don't need too much of it. Like, of course we need regulation. We shouldn't be cutting down so many trees that we'll never be able to sustain the forest industry. It's terrible for jobs. Yeah. There's a whole lot of those kinds of things. So I really, I'm sad about the direction BC's really gone in because, I think I was a pretty centrist leader. I was very, very focused on economic growth. And I think Gordon was a pretty centrist leader, although, most people don't think of him.
He had the right to do it, though, right?
Yeah,
to be a centrist.
But you have to unite the right. So that's the thing, is that I think that most British Columbians are somewhere in the practical center. And when you split it in half, all it does is radicalize everybody. And then those of us who are practical have nowhere to go. So I don't see an end to it at the moment, because I think, if my worry is if John Rustad couldn't ride the biggest wave, conservative wave in BC history to win the election.
People were talking it's going to be like 77-2 in 2001 type thing. I guess it'd be more like 89-2 or 3 or whatever the numbers are now. But
it's tough. And then, so if he couldn't do that then we're going to have another NDP government. And, to take partisanship out of it, we're going to have another big spending, massive deficit, high regulation, anti-resource development government. And that's terrible for Canada.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I asked this to most people who've been on the show, after I ran, Ellis got in. There's Wanda Good who also ran on.
Oh, Wanda was a terrific
awesome.
candidate.
She was just so amazing.
We could have had one of the biggest Indigenous caucuses inside our caucus. Definitely. We would have had in BC history in that election.
It would have been amazing. But now we're watching, First Nations people get elected in multiple parties now. We're seeing them run in different parties. I've been asked by a few people, why don't you develop a First Nations party? And I always say back to the same thing, like, we could never agree on a platform, for one thing, because, there's a couple First Nations leaders, and any First Nations leader can, don't get me wrong, anyone can, but those who can run and actually give it a real good shot are very diverse on their opinions. And I think of the Bob Chamberlains of the world. I mean, Stuart Phillip could probably win an election in the right riding just because of the prominence that he's had from saying no to so many things over the years.
Really? What riding would that be?
Well, his community's probably not going to work there because, the Okanagan Indian Band isn't big enough to outweigh the rest of the area. But I think if he decided to run, they would find a safe spot, soft spot for him somewhere.
Yeah.
So my question is, why didn't you do that for me? Why'd you give me one of those cushy Lower Mainland ridings?
Because I thought you were such a great candidate. You would win in that riding, and you were. Do you remember the trucker rallies we would have up there?
We pulled so well heading into it. Nick Facey, who, Nick and I kind of grew up together because he was also interested in running in that election, and I'm not going to ask. I just know that I got made the candidate, and to his credit, he says, let me be your campaign manager.
Yeah, he's a great
we just dug
person.
in, and I knocked 12,000 doors, and we just did everything we could. Right up to that night, we thought we were going to pull it off by about 1,000 votes.
So did we, yeah.
I guess you were hoping the same thing. Yeah.
I know, and then Andrew Weaver decides he's going to, no, and Daryl Pleckus decide they're going to upset the whole apple cart.
Yes, which ironically was, one of my big supporters when I was, I tell this story a lot, but, I remember when you first asked me, you're like, you keep telling me what's wrong with my government, come help me fix it.
Yeah.
You and I had that discussion in your office first, and then just for about 6 months, we jabbed with each other about it, like, you think about it? And I'm like, yeah, sort of, and then finally, okay, let's do it. And to be honest with you, the overwhelming support that I got from the right side of your big tent was just really hit me in the heart a little bit. I think of the advice I got from people like Bill Bennett, and who came up and helped me stump, Rich Coleman, who actually lent me some money from his campaign till my fundraising kicked in. We actually got very good at fundraising at the end, but to help get us started and bringing in a couple other volunteers and things like that. But it was just such a learning experience for me.
Do you think if the Liberal Party, BC Liberal Party, ever came back, or some vestige of it, some example of it, you would run again?
After the election, I remember I called Mike McDonald and was like, okay, I don't think we're going to pull this off. What do I do? And he says, well, wait a couple of days before you go get drunk. But he says, go over, shake her hand. Don't concede, but just go over and shake her hand and just shake her hand.
Yeah.
And then we didn't know that the shit show in Comox Valley was happening, where it was down to 2 or 3 votes possibly and things like that. But the one piece of advice I got from people was saying, just don't make yourself unelectable anymore.
Yeah.
So it's always in the back of my mind. I got young children, as you know. My daughters are growing and things like that.
Because you know what? I'm not blowing smoke here. I think you'd be a great premier.
What? I joked one day we were at Geoscience BC's 10th anniversary, and the chair of Geoscience BC got up, and just as a joke, he said, it's 2025, and John Horgan's in his 3rd term as premier. And then he asked me to come up, and I said, well, with all due respect, I'm going to be premier in 2025. So it's kind of funny that you say that.
Interesting.
But it's something that I am definitely interested in.
I like it. Well, you tell me how I can help you.
I need the dust to settle on this shit show that's going on first. Like we said, I mean, it's polar opposites right now.
Listen, you can't. This is a completely unpredictable situation. We have no idea how the shit show is going to end, how long it's going to go on, who's going to end up dead and living at the end of it. So be ready, Dallas. Be ready. Seriously.
I got my door knocking shoes. I got my Team 2017 jacket still. So we'll see how it plays out.
Canada could use a premier like you.
Well, I appreciate it. After Wob Canoe made it, I was like, oh, well, crazier things could happen.
He's turned out to be a pretty good guy.
He's turned out to be a pretty fundamental good, he's pragmatic. He's pragmatic. And that's the interesting thing that you were able to see because I had some life experience, writing those declaration papers when you decide to run, and when I had to sit down with Emile and Laura Miller and all those people, and they're like, okay, you got to tell us anything someone might come at the premier with, because, she's supporting you, and she's been public about supporting you on this. So we need to know if someone's going to get up and say, wow, he's a piece of shit and did this, or some kind of, so I'm bearing my soul on this bloody thing, just thinking, what the hell did I get myself into?
I know.
But then Wob comes in, and he's premier, and him and I both grew up pretty hard. I mean.
Well, and people who have had a hard life should be in politics.
No, well,
they should be.
I've got more life experience than most, right?
That's right. So. That's right. Because you can, if it's just like rich white people who've grown up in cities, which it mostly is, I learned about First Nations communities by going to them, by sitting down with them, by getting yelled at by people, by getting boycotted and protested, right? That's how I learned about First Nations communities. And, because I'm a middle-class teacher's kid from Burnaby. It wasn't, I'm not rich or anything, but, pretty different life.
Yeah.
So people who have had a hard life, people who have gone to jail, people who have had an addiction, people who have been convicted of something, I don't know, those people should be in politics. We shouldn't say, you're not okay because you've broken a rule. In fact, I think the fact that people do something, that you've had some life experience, you come back from it, is actually probably the best recommendation for politics, because you're open-minded and you're forgiving.
True.
And you understand that reconciliation is something you need to do with yourself too.
Can't believe how the time has flown by. This is something that, I've been looking forward to for a while, but I'm toying with the idea of Res Dogs After Dark, where we get into a little bit more of the, not the personal side, but we just have some more fun and make fun of some more people.
Is there beer involved?
There's beer and possibly, mid-grade wine, at least mid to midder grade wine.
Are you, okay.
Yeah, so
okay, I like
I'll put you on the list for that.
I don't have high standards.
No, well, it's not in candidate selection apparently. But just for the viewers out there, what are you doing now officially? I know you're taking some time to enjoy your life a little bit, but you still keep popping up on TV. Are you still doing some boards? Are you still?
I do some board work, and I work for a law firm called Bennett Jones. So we're based in Calgary, Vancouver, Toronto, and we do big infrastructure. So I support clients who are trying to get big infrastructure done, and I can tell you, there's a lot of people working really hard, and they need a lot of help right now. Because so it's
Again, that experience.
That's right. The lawyers are making a lot of money here, folks,
They're
and
doing okay.
that's not where we want that these projects to actually get done.
Oh, definitely. That final investment decision is so important. Right?
That's what it all is. So I'm kind of doing that. I'm going to start my own podcast.
Are you?
Start the new Christy Clark show.
There you go. Oh,
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
You can come on it and explain First Nations to the rest of the country.
Oh, well, it's easy.
Really?
Yeah.
It's like nothing?
Well, it's a work in progress anyway.
Yeah. Well, that would be awesome to have you on my show.
Nice. No,
when we get it going.
Well, I can't wait. I hope I get on before those Hotel Pacifico guys. I heard that hotel should be condemned, but they're working on things over there. But
what? They're taking a very myopic view necessarily. It's like necessary detail about what's all happening in the province. So I think that what they do is really, I know you're joking, really important. But what you do here is bigger. It's different.
I'm having some fun with it, I mean, I've been in the political realm. Sounds really douchey, but I've been around politics for a long time now, and I've sort of always been talking about other people's visions and goals, and the fact that I've got a little experience now and get to share some of it is one of the things why I'm still doing this. I'm hosting a couple of resource development conferences and resource management conferences that we do, and we decided the podcast might be fun to keep reaching out to people, and the uptake's been great. So we'll have to get you a hoodie. I'm not wearing it right now. Oh, let's see if we can get the
Res Dog Walkers.
This is our new logo. Yeah, so we'll make sure we get you a hoodie.
That's the logo just for the Res Dog Walkers?
Just for the Res Dog Walkers.
How did you come up with that name?
So back to aquaculture. So the people against aquaculture, there's a lady named Alexandra Morton.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
I know you know her. Yeah, she's written you a few letters.
She invented this whole story about the sea lice
the American
killing.
Scientologist. Yes.
Was it an American?
Well, she's an American Scientologist.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
That's where her roots come from. But she said that our people should get jobs walking dogs to supplement their income instead of doing aquaculture. And
wow.
It pissed me off so bad.
Are
to
there
a point
a lot
I
of
just had to
people in
laugh.
your community who don't have time to walk their own dogs?
Well, and you've been to a few reses. The dogs on the res are the alphas. The bears stay away from the dogs on the res. So
yeah, they're not leashed.
for this little unscientific, unregulated, unlicensed scientist to be telling me what I should be doing in my communities for economic development is one thing, but the fact that she just said res dog walkers, it just kind of made a couple of us laugh who've been promoting the industry in this sector. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to call my show the Res Dog Walkers.
I like it.
And so there's 4 or 5 of us original Res Dog Walkers. I was kind of watching too much Sons of Anarchy at the time, so I've got visions of these vests with Res Dog Walkers on them and walking into a bar and have people just going, whoa. But yeah, so Res Dog Walkers is born. We're in our 3rd season now. We're having some fun with it, and we look forward to having you back soon.
I will come back if you give me a T-shirt between now and then.
Done. We'll be done. We'll spill some wine on that part, and
so this is the evening edition.
Yes,
this is the after dark edition.
After dark edition. Res Dog Walkers.
I'm 100% down for that. A little IPA, maybe.
Yeah, there we go. A little IPA, maybe some chicken wings or something like that. Maybe we'll watch. You and I both like Canucks games. We seem to bump into each other at Canucks games.
Perfect.
All the time,
Perfect. I won't wear a white shirt.
Yeah. No. Not then. Yeah.
Not then.
All right, guests, I want to thank you so much for this great conversation. I want to remind you that BC Indigenous Resource Opportunities Conference is June 3rd to 5th in Nanaimo, BC.
Is that the showcase?
That is. No, that's Stewart's.
Okay.
Stewart's is the showcase November 12th this year, 12th and 13th.
Okay.
This year. I actually just found out I'll be playing a role in that, so sorry if I let the cat out of the bag too early, Stuart, but looking forward to support anybody who wants to create jobs for First Nations people and anyone. Jobs are so important to our economy, and we took the ones that we had for granted, so we got to start rebuilding them. But Christy, I want to thank you as always, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
It was nice to be here. Thank you, Dallas. It's been great.
Gaila Kessler. Oh, 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 oh! yo.